I had exactly 3 seconds between the moment I walked into that room and the moment I understood what my friends had done. 3 seconds to take in the small function hall at the back of Kowalski's bar, the string lights someone had put up for no good reason, the folding table with a paper tablecloth, and the woman sitting alone at the end of it. Dark hair pulled back, one hand wrapped around a coffee mug, a manual wheelchair parked quietly at the table's edge like it had always belonged there. 3 seconds before I heard Marcus laugh behind me and say, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Hey, at least you won't have to run after this one." The room went quiet in the way a room goes quiet when something that was always wrong finally makes a sound. I turned around. Not because I needed to think about what I'd heard. I'd heard it clearly. I turned around because I needed Marcus to see my face. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 34. I do logistics coordination for a mid-sized distribution firm, which is a job that sounds exactly as interesting as it is, and I live in a 2-bedroom apartment where one bedroom has slowly become a reading room because I ran out of shelf space 3 years ago and gave up pretending I would fix it. I own one plant. His name is Gerald. He is doing okay. I had been set up on exactly 4 blind dates in my life before that evening. All 4 had been arranged by Marcus Hale, who had been my closest friend since we were 19, and who had, in the time since, developed a particular talent for finding women he thought were wrong for me and presenting them as if they were doing me a favor. I had tolerated this because Marcus's heart was, at its core, good, even when his execution was not. I was beginning to revise that assessment. Her name was Claire Sato. I didn't know that yet. I didn't know anything yet. What I knew was the look on her face, the specific, contained expression of someone who had heard the joke and had decided, a long time before tonight, that she was going to outlast every room that made it. She was looking at me, not at Marcus, at me. I held her gaze for a moment. Then I turned back to the table. "Marcus," I said, "you should apologize." The room was 6 people. Marcus, his girlfriend Priya, 2 other couples from the friend group, Jed and Simone, Will and Kate, and Claire, who had apparently arrived early and been sitting alone for 20 minutes, nursing her coffee, while the rest of the table had been at the bar. I didn't know yet how that had happened. I would find out later that Marcus had told her the reservation was at 7, told everyone else 8, and had been at the bar since 6:30, which I was choosing not to think about at that particular moment. "Danny, come on," Marcus said, but the laugh had already gone out of his voice. It was a joke. "Apologize," I said again, directly to her. Now the function room had approximately the acoustic quality of a small church. There was nowhere for any of this to go. Marcus looked at Claire. She looked back at him with the expression of someone who had stopped expecting anything and was now simply collecting data. He opened his mouth once, closed it, and said, "Sorry, Claire. That was out of line." She nodded once. Efficient, unimpressed, filed, I pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. The server had appeared in the doorway with the expression of someone who deeply wished they were somewhere else. I asked if we could get 2 more coffees and a menu. "You drink coffee this late?" Claire asked. Her voice was dry and direct and had a small, precise quality, like she measured each sentence before she released it. "I was told the dinner was at 8, I said. Someone appears to have moved the time. That got the smallest real smile from her. She looked at her mug. She turned it once in her hands. Her fingers tightened around it briefly. Not nervousness, I thought. Something more like the gesture of a person choosing to stay in a room they had considered leaving. "I was told 7, she said. "I know," I said. The server came back with 2 coffees and the menus. From the other end of the table, I could hear Priya quietly saying something to Marcus in a tone that suggested his evening was not going to improve. I was not thinking about Marcus's evening. Here is what I noticed about Claire Sato in the first 20 minutes. She had a water bottle clipped to the back of her chair with a carabiner, matte black, slightly dented, the kind that gets that way from being thrown into a bag every morning by someone who is always slightly late and does not apologize for it. It had a small sticker on the side, a cartoon cloud with a lightning bolt. I couldn't tell yet if it was ironic. She worked in architectural accessibility consulting, which she described in approximately 12 words, and then looked at me to see if I was going to say something foolish. I didn't. I asked what that meant in practice. She looked mildly surprised by the question, then answered it properly. She had a habit, when thinking, of tilting her head slightly to the left and saying nothing for a beat longer than most people are comfortable with. She had done this twice, and both times the answer that followed had been worth the wait. She ordered the salmon. She asked the server one specific question about how it was prepared. The server answered. She said thank you in a way that meant it. She had been in her chair since she was 22, which she mentioned once, briefly, in context, and in the tone of someone who provides this information because it is accurate and not because it requires any particular response from me. Should I say something? I asked. She looked at me. Like what? I'm not sure, I said. That's why I'm asking. She turned her mug once again. Most people either say nothing and look like they're trying not to look, or they say too much and look like they want to meddle. I'm in a difficult position, I said. Logistically, yes, I have poor survival instincts around sharp women. I was beginning to understand this was going to be a recurring problem. By 9 o'clock, the rest of the table had rearranged itself the way groups do, when they sense 2 people have stopped being a social obligation and become something else. Marcus was being careful around me in the way of a man who knows he has done something and is hoping time will do the work of forgiveness. Priya had, at some point, moved her chair closer to Claire and said something I didn't hear, and Claire had laughed, properly, the first real laugh of the evening, and Priya had looked satisfied in the way of someone who has decided to like a person and been correct. I told Claire about Gerald, the plant. She asked what kind. I said I didn't know. He had come with the apartment. I had kept him alive through approximately 2 years of ignoring him, and one incident involving a window being left open in November. Survival of the indifferent, she said. That's actually on his pot now, I said. I wrote it on a piece of tape. She looked at me, her head tilted left. The small beat of silence before the verdict. That's either very stupid or unexpectedly sweet, she said. Both, I said. Usually, she laughed again. This one surprised her. She set her mug down a beat too quickly, too fast, like she'd been caught off guard by the sound of herself. She looked at the table for a moment before looking back at me, and something in her expression had shifted, not dramatically, not in any way she would have admitted to, but enough that I noticed it. I was deciding, at this point, whether to say anything about it. I decided not to. Not yet. Here is the part I did not expect. About 40 minutes in, when the food had arrived and the table had fractured into its natural, smaller conversations, Claire asked me about the job. Not politely, with actual curiosity, in the way she seemed to approach most things, which was to ask a precise question and then wait to see whether the answer was worth anything. I told her what logistics coordination actually meant, that it was mostly the gap between what the system says is possible and what the floor says is true. The friction between a spreadsheet and a warehouse. She nodded slowly. She said, "Same problem as mine, different scale. A plan that doesn't account for how people actually move through a space isn't a plan." I had not thought of it that way. She had a small scar near her left eyebrow. I didn't ask. It caught the light when she turned her head. I noticed and filed it. The way you file the things about a person you are not yet ready to admit you are collecting. She asked about the reading room. I described it. She asked which direction the window faced. I said north, mostly gray light, good for reading, bad for plants. She said, "Gerald in the wrong room then." I said Gerald had been moved twice and had expressed no preference. She said, "That's suspicious. Plants know." I told her Gerald's silence was probably disapproval. She said she respected that kind of communication style. This is what I didn't tell Marcus afterwards, or Priya, or anyone at that table. I had been out with someone, briefly, 18 months before. Someone uncomplicated and kind who had wanted something that made complete sense, and from whom I had walked away, still not entirely sure why. My therapist had said something about patterns of waiting for a feeling that felt proportionate to the risk. I had thought about that sentence approximately once every 3 weeks since she said it. Sitting at that table, I was thinking about it. It was Jed who did it. In fairness to Jed, he was on his 3rd drink and was the kind of person who fills silences by saying the thing he is thinking, which has served him well roughly half the time. He leaned across the table and said to Claire, with genuine curiosity and no apparent awareness that genuine curiosity is not the same as tact, "So how long have you been doing it?" "The chair, I mean." Claire set her mug down. The table temperature dropped 2 degrees. Simone put her hand on Jed's arm, in the way of someone who has married a good person with no instincts. 12 years, Claire said. Her voice was steady and efficient and told Jed nothing. "Right," Jed said. "Yeah, right." There was a silence. "I've been doing logistics for 6 years," I said. "Nobody asks me how I'm handling it." Jed laughed. The table relaxed. That is not the comforting version of what happened. It is the accurate one. Under the table, Claire's hand was resting near the arm of her chair. Her fingers had tightened once around the armrest and then released. I had probably not been meant to notice that. I noticed it. At 10:15, most of the table had moved toward the bar. Marcus had come to find me first, hovering near my chair with the expression of a man attempting contrition without knowing the right words for it. "Look, Danny. Not tonight," I said. "We'll talk, not tonight." He nodded. He went. Claire was watching me. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I've managed difficult rooms before." "I know," I said. "That's not why I'm here." She looked at me for a moment. Her head did not tilt. She did not buy time. "Why are you here?" she asked. I picked up my coffee. It was cold by now. I drank it anyway because it gave me 3 seconds to think about whether I was going to say the true thing or the easier thing. I set the cup down. "Because I came in and Marcus made that joke and you didn't flinch," I said. "Not because you didn't hear it. Because you'd already decided the joke wasn't going to be the point of the evening." And I thought, I want to know how someone gets to that. She was very still. Not dramatically. Just still. "That's a strange reason," she said, after the pause. "I told you I have poor survival instincts." She laughed. And this time she didn't try to put it back. At some point, Priya came back from the bar and sat down beside Claire and said something very quietly. I was pretending to check my phone and was not reading a word of it. Claire listened. She said something back. Priya laughed and looked at me with an expression I chose not to analyze too carefully. I was deciding, at this point, whether I was being managed. I decided I didn't mind. The table had narrowed to the four of us, Priya and Marcus at the far end, their voices low. Whatever was being discussed, none of my business. And Claire and me at our end, the paper tablecloth between us now bearing the evidence of 2 hours, a coffee ring, a small architecture diagram she'd drawn explaining a structural problem she'd found last week. In the wrong place, a meter that made a corridor impassable, someone in an office who had signed off without testing it, and the word contemptuous which she had written and then circled when I had agreed it was the right word. She drew well, precise, fast lines. She caught me watching her hand and looked up. "Habit," she said. "It's good," I said. She looked at the diagram. "It's just how I think. I need to see where things are." "Yeah," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Something shifted, not in her face exactly, but in the quality of the stillness around her. Like a room where someone has just turned off a background noise you hadn't noticed until it stopped. She looked back at the diagram. She added a line. She didn't say anything. I didn't say anything either. This went on for approximately 45 seconds, which is a long time for two people who have been talking steadily for 2 hours. Neither of us appeared to find it unusual. That, I think, was the thing. We were still at the table at 11 when the staff started quietly stacking chairs around the room. The bar had gone down to 3 people, and a sports rerun on a screen nobody was watching. The matte black water bottle was on the table now. She'd unclipped it sometime in the last hour, without me registering when. She had told me about the consulting work properly. The difference between a building that follows code and a building that actually works for the people in it. The gap, she said, was usually about 3 inches and a committee decision. I had told her about Gerald's November incident. She had asked follow-up questions about the window latch. I suspected she had some professional interest in the structural failure. We had somehow covered her sister in Vancouver, the logistics software that was going to replace half my job within 5 years, and which I was trying to feel philosophical about, a film we had both seen and disagreed about, and the precise methodology for brewing coffee in a way that made it worth drinking. "You're still here," she said. Not an accusation, something more careful than that. "The chairs are being stacked around us," I said. "They've been doing that for 10 minutes. "I noticed," I said. She looked at her hands. She was quiet for a moment. Not the measuring kind of quiet, a different kind. The kind that comes before something that requires a different kind of courage. "I told my sister about this dinner," she said, slowly, "when Marcus set it up. She asked what I thought it was going to be like, and I said..." She stopped. She picked up the water bottle. Set it down. "I said I thought it was going to be the kind of evening where someone is unexpectedly kind, and I'm supposed to be grateful." That sentence sat in the room between us, and did something quiet to it. "And?" I asked. She looked up at me. Her voice dropped just a little. "And this is not that," she said. I felt something in my chest shift. Not dramatically. Just enough. "You don't have to tell me what this is," I said. "We can go get a decent coffee somewhere and decide later." She looked at me for 1 second longer, then felt safe. Then she laughed, short and real, through her nose, the kind of laugh that means the person has given up on being guarded and has decided to be honest instead. "I said yes too fast," she said. "You said yes," I said. "Yes." She picked up the water bottle again. She turned it once in her hand. The cartoon lightning bolt on the sticker caught the light. I said yes too fast, like I'd been waiting for someone to ask a question I could actually answer. I looked at her. at the way she was holding the bottle, at the small, precise quality of her voice when she stopped measuring words, at the expression of someone who had, in fact, been in difficult rooms before and had decided, on balance, that this one was different. "My name is in my phone as Daniel," I said, "in case you were wondering what to save it as." She looked at me. Something in her expression went still again. And then, very slowly, came undone. "Mine's in mine as Claire Saito, accessibility consultant." "Unlikely," she said. "Unlikely what?" "I'll tell you," she said, "when I know." I reached across the table. My hand rested near hers, not taking it, just near it, offering the proximity and leaving the rest to her. Her hand turned. Her fingers found mine. That was when the last member of the bar staff appeared in the doorway and said, very apologetically, that they were closing. I looked up and said we were just leaving, thank you. Claire was already reaching for her coat, a small smile running away at the corner of her mouth that she was doing absolutely nothing to stop. 3 months later, she sent me a voice note at 7 in the morning, before I had found my glasses, to tell me she had been at a site visit and found a building that was technically accessible and practically insulting, and she was going to write a report about it that would use the word contemptuous in the executive summary. I sent her back a voice note saying that sounded correct and also that Gerald was looking healthy. She said she was glad someone was. I thought about what Marcus had said at the beginning of that evening, and the face Claire had made. The specific contained expression of a person who has decided to outlast the room. I thought about how she had been sitting alone for 20 minutes before I arrived, and how she had stayed. I didn't tell her that I loved her in any formal way, that evening or the evening after. I told her other things, specific things, the kind of things that only mean something because they are about a particular person and would mean nothing about anyone else. I told her, when something good happened at work, she was the first person I thought to call. I told her I had started paying attention to how buildings were built, entrances, lifts, the distance between surfaces, in a way that had changed how I moved through cities. I told her the reading room now had a second chair. She said, "That is a very slow declaration." I said, "You said you'd tell me what unlikely meant when you knew." She was quiet for a moment, the particular measuring kind of quiet. "Unlikely," she said, as in this was unlikely, and it happened anyway. I told her that sounded right. 2 years later, when people ask how we met, and they ask, because she is the kind of person that makes strangers want to know her story, she tells it straight. The fake reservation time. The joke, the cold coffee. The water bottle. The word unlikely. She tells it the way she does everything, efficiently, without flinching, with the occasional precise word that lands harder than anyone expects. People always ask what I said when Marcus made the joke. She tells them, and then she looks at me the way she looked at me across that table, 1 second longer than feels safe, and then she looks away. Nothing important appeared overnight. It simply stopped hiding.